Now, once that's done, I want to create a little shadow underneath this. This is going to cast a little bit of a shadow. So I'm going to get my square, or my rectangle tool, and I'm going to create straight across a gradient. I'm going to come up here with fade to black. I'll select my gradient tool. I'm going to drag top to bottom because this is where it starts, this is where it finishes. Okay. Now I want to come here and drag this middle part in my gradient palette to the center. So my transition is a little more gradual. Now, as I select this and I bring it over the top of this, I want you to notice that gradually what happens is we start to disappear, it starts to fade. The reason for that is if I go over to my gradient palette, if I select here, we are at an opacity of 100% on this point right here, on this slider. Over here, we're at opacity of 0%, and it's 0% black. Now I can change that and make it darker, or a little lighter, or a little more transparent gradually. In this case, I'm just going to keep it like that, and that's going to be my shadow. So I can make this transition to be 0. So it will gradually just blend off. I'm going to shrink that box a little bit, and this is going to form the basis of my shadow, or my object right here. Now I'll get my rotation tool. I'm going to click and drag this up and rotate it. And then I've got to kind of come over here and get it underneath there. Now I may or may not be right on. If I'm not, it won't really matter, because what I am going to do is go ahead and go Object, Arrange, Send Backward. And that's going to send that back. Let's see here. Got it. Let's make sure I didn't do it for some reason. Object, Arrange, Send Backward. That's weird, it's not doing it. Select this and instead go Object, Arrange, Bring to Front. See if that. And I don't know what happened, but somehow that wasn't working right. Now I'm going to select this, and you can still see, if I zoom in, you can see some of that grain going on. Well, I'm going to use a different tool now, or a different palette that we haven't talked about yet, and that's the Transparency palette. Go to Transparency, and where did it pop up? Here we go. Right now it's normal, which means it's going to block out color that's behind it. I can change this mode to a lot of different things, like darken or multiply. There are different variations, and this close you're not going to see as many of them. Lighten, screen. You can experiment with this on your own. In this case, I'm going to multiply it. So what it does is it creates a shadow that's cast from the tablecloth. And it seems a little strong, so I'm going to pull it in just a little bit. So we've got this kind of nice shadow going on right there. Now you'll see that the edges are extending out past a little bit. I'm not going to worry about that for two reasons. First of all, because we've got a line going around here that represents the page. This area isn't going to print, so it doesn't matter. And then second, I can always draw a mask over parts or things over it to kind of block that out. And that's what I'm going to do. Well, we're done with our tablecloth right now, and we're done with this, with our table. So, actually, we're going to do one last thing because we do have time. I'm going to get the straight line tool, and I'm going to click and drag across like this. Now, it doesn't have a fill or a stroke. I'm going to change that fill to, or that stroke, to a light gray. Alright, now I'm going to go to my stroke palette, and I'm going to create a dashed line. We're going to make this dash 10. It assumes if your dash is 10 that your gap is also going to be 10. You can also go in and change that and make this 30 or 20 or 40. It'll make bigger or smaller ones. And instead of having a really flat gap here, I'm going to cap it like that, so we have a little more of a rounded shape. Okay, so now I've created a little hem along there, and my transparency, I can keep it at normal, but I'm going to bring it down just a little bit in opacity because it's thin, and some of that color is going to wind around it a little bit, so it'll give me a sense that I've got a little bit of a seam there. So just a little touch. Alright, now let's go ahead and we're going to move on and we're going to start the plate. So get ready, and in order to get ready, we'll want to get our plate layer and be selected on that. Okay, with our plate layer selected, we're going to do a couple of things. First of all, we've got to create a plate, right? So here's our ellipse. I'm going to click, and I'm actually going to drag from a center point and create a plate, and I'm going to fill that with white for my fill color. Now I want this plate to have a sense of dimension. In fact, I'm going to draw sort of what I want the plate to look like from the side, and you don't have to do this. But if I'm drawing this, I want a plate that looks sort of like this. If I were to do a cutaway from the side, and I get something that looks like that. Okay. Now if my light source, let's say my light source is coming from this angle. So I'm coming like this. Actually, we're going to change that. We're going to have our light coming from about this angle, like that. Let me change it to a little different color so it's easier to see. Alright, so our light's coming here, which means that on this edge right here, I'm going to get a little bit of a shadow. It's going to be really bright light right here. It's going to start a little lighter here and get gradually darker. It's going to be a little brighter here, a little darker here because the angle that it's hitting at. So this is the goal of what I'm going to do, and I've got to create a number of different surfaces. Each of these becomes a different surface. Okay? So first I'm going to select this plate, and I'm going to give it a gradient. Let's click here right now. Now again, this is just a default gradient. I'm going to change my opacity here to 100% because I do want that to be 100%. Now I'm going to make the center of this white, and then I'm going to make the outside, or the second half of this gradient, blue. Now I'm going to change that from a linear to a radial, so that I've got this gradient coming like this. Now this area right here, we're going to keep our light source coming from this angle. So this area here is going to be a little darker, but all of this is going to be really quite light. Especially this edge right here is going to be really hot, and while we won't see it a lot, we do want to make sure that works. So I'm going to get my gradient tool, I'll select my plate, now I'm going to click outside of this and drag clear down like that. So our highlight, our really bright area, is right here where the light's hitting, and as it gets farther out, or closer to this right here, it's going to get a little darker. Okay? So let me undo that. So that's the first part of that plate. Now we need to make a second part, this surface right here. Now this shape, both sides of this cutaway are encompassed in this shape right here. So now I'm going to go ahead and select this, I'm going to copy it, so Command C, and then I'm going to go Edit, Paste in Front, or Command F. So paste in front. Now it only looks like I have one object there, but I actually have two because I pasted it in front. In this case though, now I'm going to get my black arrow, and I'm going to push the Command or the Option key so that it will scale in to a center point. And then after I start moving it, I'm going to push the Shift key so it will constrain that. Now, this area, I think I'm going to keep this here just so we can see it. I'm going to get rid of some of these other things. Unlock our table, and I can get rid of that. Move this right down here so we can see, and the light source to it so we can see as well. With this second shape, we're going to see a lot more light on here because of the angle that the light's hitting. It won't be quite as bright as here, but it will be certainly more bright than what's going on there. So I'm going to get my gradient tool again, and I'm just going to drag that existing color down a little bit, because in this case we've already got the gradient provided, so we're going to create that other gradient right here as a way to be, or we're not going to create it, we're just going to move it and manipulate what's there as a way to adjust that shadow, okay, or the way that light is hitting that surface. I'm going to copy that, Command C, and then Command F. It's going to paste the same image in there. In this case though, now we've got to scale it down because this is a lot smaller. That's this area right here. Now we're making this little surface right here and right here, which means this area, because of the angle of the light, is going to be really bright. This is going to be kind of dim. So in this case, what we can do is either go in and rotate this like that, which works, or for the gradient, I'm just going to click and drag like this. I'm going to extend that a little further so that gets a little bit darker. So now we've got that highlighted version. Now remember, you can always stop and rewind this so that you can double check and make sure that you understand it, and I encourage you to do that. And watch the video while you're working on the same thing. So right now I'm going to select this, and I'm going to copy it and paste it in front, because this is going to be my final surface right here. And then with my black arrow, I'm going to push the Option key so it scales from the center, and push Shift after I start moving it so that it will constrain it. That's this surface right here. And now I'm going to go ahead, and this is the area where the light's going to hit the hardest. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to drag out like that. Now the light may be hitting a little too hard right there, so I can always drag this up and soften that just a little bit. So there's my plate. Now I'm going to go ahead and leave that as it is. That looks perfect. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to leave the light source here for a moment. What I've got